right. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe, yes. Okay. So, folks, this is lesson 12 of the Zero to Hero, the Power Out Automate Adventure. And today we have none other than Natalie Pienkowska. Did I get it right?
That's one variation.
You know, I probably have to do an internship somewhere up in Europe just to learn names because I really sucked at it. Thomas, don't make fun of me, man. I tried yours. I think I learned yours. I don't know if you realize when you show up today, I was like, Tomas, trying my best to say it properly.
I mean, yeah,
You see,
the
give
first
me
day was
time.
really good.
You know, give a brother some time to learn these things. I'll get better at it. Natalie, I'm so sorry, okay?
No, I don't get offended. Don't worry. Like sometimes I don't need to pronounce other people's names too. It's okay.
All right, all right. Well, Natalie was so gracious to donate us her time. She's off. I think she's in holiday, a mix of holidaycation, I guess. Like most of us do when we go on vacation. It's never through vacation. And she was so generous to give us time and guide us in how to create custom connectors, how to properly publish them, and follow all the rules so that you see a beautiful connector show up in Power Automate. Natalie, again, thank you, and the floor is yours. Take it away.
Great. Thanks so much for having me today. So I will just get my PowerPoint sharing, and then we can begin. Great. So thanks for joining today. We'll just briefly use this session to go over independent publisher connectors, but also certified connectors, right? And they all fall into this bubble. So I'll try to navigate and show you basically, what are the offerings and possibilities in our ecosystem when it comes to connectors today. But before that, just a quick agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about Power Platform and connectors, right? I mean, you're all pretty aware of it, so I'm just going to go over the breakdown of the types of connectors that we are, our Power Platform connectors offer. Then we'll go over into question times. I know we have a small live audience today, but I do want to just have a conversation and make this more interactive, especially about like connector usage and connectors that you feel are missing and functionality that's missing. Then we'll go over this simple chart that I made on our overview of our certification programs, just to give a sense for people to know where to contribute and how. And then we'll go over how you can become an independent publisher. So just quick overview, again, about the Power Platform connector ecosystem. We're almost at 600 connectors, which is pretty awesome. That's a pretty huge milestone. We used to, when we first started out a couple of years ago, we used to build all the connectors ourselves, as in our engineering team. And some of those were not just, Outlook, SharePoint, or Teams, but they were also third-party connectors from way back. And some of those are still on our platform today. But, over time, especially with the announcement of the first certification program about 2 or 3 years ago, which we kind of refer to as the API owner program, that's where most of our connectors are coming in from today. So it's Adobe, it's on the screen, you can see Acumatica, Africa's Talking, Agility, and so many more, right? So these are companies that are coming in who have APIs and who want to integrate with our platform. And of course, we still have Microsoft connectors coming along the way, actually through one of the independent publisher connector programs that we have. There are some first-party connectors like Azure AD, different endpoints to Azure AD, and Power BI admin connector, and an MVP connector. And I know there's a lot of MVPs in this community, so hopefully you'll be able to use that as well. So those connectors are a little bit of a variation, right? Because they're built by an independent publisher, but they're going to show up in a similar way as an API owner connector. So you'll see those once they come out. And the reason why that's the case is because those connectors are going to be standard. Those couple that I just mentioned, Power BI, the 2 Azure AD connectors, Microsoft MVP connector as well, those will be standard, so they will be certified, because by nature, independent publisher connectors are all premium, right? So just wanted to give a heads up out there that, you know, there are still some first-party connectors that are coming externally, but mostly they're all being maintained by Microsoft in-house, right? But there's like so many APIs out there, so 600 connectors, around 600 connectors is a good number, but you can always have more, especially if you think about all the products that you use day to day. So question time. So please unmute yourselves. We'll start with the first one. What Power Platform connectors do you mostly use today? And when you think about those, is there any functionality requests that you have? Like, oh, I wish I had that action, or oh, I wish I had that capability. Any come to mind?
The ones I use the most, I use a lot of the Dataverse and Outlook connectors. I've used, Graph quite a bit lately, so I love those. One thing that I'm not sure if it makes sense should turn into a connector, but it'd be great. It's connectors for integration between Power Platform and SharePoint. I'll give you an example. I had to create an automate that had to go through the document location table in Dataverse and do things in SharePoint. It's somewhat easy to do with two connectors, but then you have to do a bunch of queries to get information that you're looking for. So it'd be nice, this may not relate to Automate itself, but it'd be nice for the platform to offer a way to see a file directly or location from Dynamics without having to do that customization on a flow itself. Yeah.
That's interesting. You're almost proposing like a different UI experience within a different Microsoft product.
Yeah. But anyhow, I mean, the connectors I see today, they work. It'd be nice to see. I saw this guy in the community who did a bunch of connectors for like a diabetes monitor the other day. I thought that was really cool. And I don't know if it was you, Tomasz, who did like home automation connectors.
Yeah, just one with the Maestrom, but that's just one connector.
Yep. But those are really cool. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the diabetes would be really interesting if you could connect me to that person. So like what I've seen, like, and we'll go over it once we look at like the types of like the full connector list that we have for independent publishers, like the themes that people are coming up with. There's a lot. It's really interesting because there's a lot about science coming out, both that are in production today and that are in the pipeline. There's one called the carbon intensity connector. That's like the first time we're ever stepping into the space of like the environment. So the diabetes one would be, again, like it'd be a pioneer in the space, right? It would be specifically related to health. So that's pretty awesome. I definitely think that we need more variety in our platform, right? There's so much more that we can bring.
Yeah, one of the things that I did in regards to this subset of connectors, every time I talk with the folks on the accelerator side, I talk about how you, Natalie, and your team have done very well in terms of setting up this process of publishing connectors, community connectors for that matter. We don't see the same thing on the other fronts for, Power Platform. It would be great if they kind of saw this as a success story and replicated it for other things.
Interesting that you say that. So what else do you think would be a good opportunity? One that comes to my mind is templates, right? Making like a better process for people to submit templates, because there's so many user scenarios that people can kind of share with each other. Did you have any other ideas besides that?
On the Dataverse, we look at accelerators as somewhat the same thing, but it would be nice if the community could create and publish accelerators as well, or even apps associated to accelerators. Like someone creates a Canvas app for nonprofit, the nonprofit accelerator or portal. It would be nice if there was a community environment, if you will, or a store for us to submit those and then undergo the same type of validation that connectors do today, and then eventually make it to like a Microsoft-backed community area where folks can download these apps. I think Pranav wants to say something. Sorry, Pranav.
Well, the second question, it says, what Power Platform connectors do you wish we offered? Well, in December, the lobe connector is coming out. Well, me and my dad were wanting the lobe connector for Power Apps so we could use our AI model in it, which we created.
The which connector? Do you mind repeating just the name?
Lobe, L-O-B-E.
Oh, it's just something that I haven't heard of. So you're saying that you wish we had that available within Power Apps.
Yes, my dad's telling me it's coming in December. Is it?
Yeah, that's something I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, it's building AI models, and it's quite cool. Right now, it's only image classification. It recognizes images and all that. Yeah, it's very easy to build, very easy, and we both quite enjoyed it. It's just that we couldn't connect it to Power Apps yet because it's not available.
I see. Is it only available in Power Automate or just nowhere yet?
No, it's standalone AI builder model. I think it's owned by Microsoft. And it's just not connected to the Power Platform yet.
Got
But
it.
you can export it in different ways, means, and then use it in different apps, web apps or other stuff, but not Power Apps for now.
Got it. That's good for me to be aware of. Thank you for sharing that.
But it's much easier than using Azure AI Builder. Very user friendly, very intuitive. And we said dad or son detector, and we were thinking about using it for some detection apps, a bit intruder alert or something.
Oh, I love that.
That's it
Any
for us.
other? Oh, go ahead.
No, that's it for us.
Oh, the first question. On the first question, what Power Platform connectors do you use today? Well, in my Canvas apps, which I build, I use quite a bit of Excel, importing from the Excel tables.
Is there anything that you feel that Excel is missing?
Anything I feel Excel's missing?
The
No,
Excel connector, rather.
I think Excel's fine, yeah.
Okay. Great. Anything else people want to share about connectors you use or connectors you wish we had? Or feedback on building a custom connector in general, if you've ever done that before?
We've never done that
No.
before.
We're citizen developers.
Oh, I mean, building a custom connector does not require any code. I'll give a sneak peek of that soon, but yeah, there's no code required. It's an optional step that we have. And Tomasz, I guess you can you can tell us, since you've built one of these before, right? So it's a lot of making sure that you're able to read API documentation and bringing that in. I would say it's a little bit more challenging than your typical citizen dev scenarios, but our goal is to eventually make it as easy as that. And so right now we're actually revisiting the current user interface to make it just easier to make it easier to use. So you'll see some updates hopefully sometime next year. But yeah, there's a really good learning module out there for building a custom connector, no code required whatsoever.
So yeah, I would say that creating your own custom connector is much easier because, well, if you're doing this for yourself, you don't really have to focus on its usability and friendliness of all the labels and descriptions and so on. Just put whatever in it and you just make sure it's working. However, when you want to make this as an independent publisher connector, then you really need to focus on all the requirements so that everything is labeled properly, described properly. It has all the attributes that are required as well added. That is just following all the requirements that are described in either GitHub and or documentation on Microsoft Docs. Plus, I learned as well several things during the submission process, because that was actually my first time of creating pull requests on Git. And that was as well the moment where I learned what mistakes I've done and what additionally I should change in the code that the JSON code of the connector that I was submitting. So in the end, it took me like a day in total, because there were like a couple of iterations between the review team and myself, and I was trying to fix what I was submitting. Yeah, so
Yeah, and
it's not hard.
Yeah, it's like when you're doing it and you're using it for yourself, right? You're creating, because the custom connector is only available in the environment that you created in. So if you're doing it just like, if you're doing it so that you can, like creating the custom connector so that you can put it into a Power App or into a workflow, right? Like Tomasz said, you don't have to go through all of those, like making sure all the descriptions and the grammar is correct. But for if you're going to publish it to the platform for anyone to see and anyone to use it, we do have those standards just so that it's easier for a customer to use and they know what they're using and they know what they're doing. So yeah, so I think we can move on. So opportunities to contribute to the Power Platform. So, if you're looking to do that, and I know that we talked about that it'd be awesome to have like other ways to contribute to the Power Platform community-wise. So definitely be bringing that feedback back. But in terms of connectors, right, the simple question is, when you're building a custom connector, right, do I own or work for the company that owns the backend service of my connector, right, the custom connector that I've built? If no, then you submit it to the Independent Publisher Connector Program. So although no is red, it's not a bad thing, right? There's still an opportunity. As of July, there's now the opportunity to submit. The entire process happens in GitHub. There's no other places you have to go except when you're obviously building the custom connector and then using the PA-Con CLI tool to extract the artifacts, edit it, and then put it in. But in terms of like the actual certification process, the whole thing lives in GitHub. But if you do, own or work for a company that owns the backend service, it's a longer process. It definitely takes a lot longer. There's a lot more involved. You have to fill out a form to get started. You have to make sure you're approved. And by approved means, we do the due diligence to make sure that you actually own the API, right? As you're saying. And then that process happens in GitHub, but mainly in ISV Studio in our certification portal, right? So, if you're talking to customers or, you're talking to other people in the community or, you're kind of considering your own background as well, right? Just, you can always pop this question in your head, right? And say like, okay, if I've built this custom connector, if I want to put it out there into the world, here are the two opportunities I have depending on API ownership, right? That's literally the only thing, right? Besides that, the process is really similar except where you go. But in terms of like how we're validating the connectors, making sure that it's actually connecting to the service that it's supposed to be connecting to, that's what we're always doing. So let's see these connectors in the product and in GitHub. So I just have this right here just to kind of show you that these connectors are dominating in terms of the independent publisher connectors are dominating this connector screen. It's interesting because they all have the same icon for the reason that, this is not the API owner. So it's a legal risk to actually use, let's say for even like, the Airtable, to use an Airtable logo. So we don't have that. We just have this generic logo here. But you can see that this is the list of the ones that we have, and I also have it on the slide as well. So it's a wide variety of connectors, and they are just available within the product with no download required. In terms of the way that the pages look, you can always see who it's published by, when it was last updated. They're all under the MIT open source license, which is a very common open source license in the space. You can also go to the documentation. You can also view them in GitHub, and you can see all the triggers and actions that are part of it. So this is for the Coinbase, right? These connector pages are significantly more detailed than, let's say, our certified connectors, and they actually follow a different template. We're hoping that down the line we can kind of combine these templates so that they're both as rich as they should be. And down the line, for the growth of the independent publisher connector program, we also want to add a couple of parameters for, usage, how these connectors are being used, by how many tenants, by what customers, right? We have to kind of figure out what we want to show, right? And the reason behind that is to make people feel confident that this connector works, people are actually using it, let me use it too, right? We're already seeing a lot of usage across them, but we feel that this is another way to gain even more usage. The other one that a lot of customers and publishers alike have been talking about is, why don't we have a rating system for independent publisher connectors, right? Like kind of like a store, kind of like, the Google App Store, or any of those, right? So, should I rate this 1 star all the way up to 5 stars? And then leave a comment, right? So that's something that we also have in our roadmap. And we're trying to kind of mitigate a lot of the issues that might be coming along with these connectors by directing customers to the GitHub repository, where we have an issues tab. So far we haven't really seen many issues for the independent publisher connectors that we have. I also know that sometimes customers email independent publishers directly, so there's also that. But yeah, just to give you a sense, this is our Power Platform Connectors official repository. There's 3 really important folders here: certified connectors. So these are connectors built by API owners. These are open sourced, and that's part of the requirement for this. So, we see the Africa's Talking SMS one that we saw on the other screen, but we also see Azure AD and Planners also in here. And it's funny because Steven Siciliano, the product lead of Power Automate, has contributed to the Planner connector. So it's pretty awesome to kind of see how anyone can really contribute to those. So that's awesome. Then we have a custom connectors folder. So this is kind of just like the playground for people to kind of like leave their custom connector here, but not actually go through the certification process because they're not interested in doing so. That's totally fine as well, right? But if you want your connector available in the product, of course, the independent publisher connector route is the way to go. So you can always, if you're, of course, it goes through a very rigorous process for validation, right? But, if you do want to take a look at the files, you're welcome to do so. They're here. The README file goes and becomes the documentation. And then you have 2 connector files. So this is mainly for authentication purposes. And the Swagger file shows the whole definition of the connector. So again, you can see that this wonderful connector, which is one of our most highly used connectors, is built by Woon. And this is for the Airtable. So yeah, and then you can see the pull requests. You can see some of the connectors that we have. So today, looks like Paul submitted an open NEM connector. So there's a lot of action happening here day to day. So you can keep track, especially if there is a connector that you've been, looking for and you heard that somebody's building it. This is the place to go. We also have some resources in our wiki. So if you take a look at learning content for independent publisher connectors, you can see one that I put in for Tomasz that he submitted. And yeah, we have great resources built by the community to get started, right? Of course, we have our own Microsoft documentation, but it's always so much better when you see somebody who's gone through the program and, has built a connector. And, especially from the outside, right? Because they can give a very different perspective, especially if they're a beginner. So this is a really great place to get started. So yeah, so now that we've gone a little bit through the product, let's go on to why should you contribute in the first place? I think one of the biggest reasons why is gaining visibility, right? Especially in terms of, for some people, they have different goals and motivations, but if you're, trying to get more career opportunities, or you're just trying to get into the open source community space and be able to network with a lot of incredible people, especially in the PNP, the patterns and practices community, this is the great place to go. We also do video recordings. I recorded one with Tomasz a week or 2 ago, and I'll be starting to post all of those soon on a weekly basis because I've done so many recordings in the past couple of weeks, which is great. And blogs as well, right? So you do get that feature because you've built one, right? You built it, you've gone through the certification process. It's kind of like that stamp of, you know how to build them, you know how to certify them, you know what you're doing, right? You've built an excellent connector. And it's always awesome to see when people come back and they update the existing connector that they've built, or they update another independent publisher connector. So everyone's kind of like sharing and getting their name out there and collaborating and networking with different people that they probably wouldn't have met otherwise. And of course, you have maintainer rights on your connector, as you know, through every open source contribution. It's a great way to share and collaborate, as I already mentioned. And the other new thing is that you can also achieve a Credly certificate. So I believe today, David Warner, who is in the PNP community, is going to send out a couple of emails to invite people to start applying for these certificates. So obviously only to those who have built independent publisher connectors. There are 4 different badges. 1 star is if you've made a tiny contribution, right? Like even if you've just gone in there and fixed a README a little, or just added, you know, one new piece of functionality to a connector, or you've helped resolve an issue, you get a 1-star badge. You get a 2-star badge if you've built a connector and you've submitted it to this program, and a 3-star badge if you've built 5 or more connectors. And you'll see that there's one person named Troy Taylor who's gone above and beyond to build, I believe it's 19. Not all of his have been certified yet, but a lot of them are in the pipeline. So it's really exciting to see how different people are, you know, using this program to, you know, network, gain visibility from Microsoft as well, and use this for their career.
Yeah, it's kind of a legacy.
Sorry?
It's a kind of a legacy, something that will stay after we are gone.
Yeah, it stays. It's like, even if you don't touch it ever again, it's there. It's there. So I always like to put the person who built it first, because that matters a little bit more. So that's why it's alphabetized by that. But we can see Tomasz on this list for the Maestrom connector. It's a really cool demo. It's the first demo where we're seeing somebody actually use like a physical object and physical space, right? So I won't spoil too much of it, but definitely keep an eye out on that one, because it's one of a kind demo. And yeah, I mean, you can see that there's a lot of the science-y, like even like going above and beyond even Earth, like the launch library or SpaceX, right? Those are super cool as well, and not connectors that we've expected to receive, but we're happy to get anything. And we've also gotten some funny connectors like the Dad Jokes connector, the Chuck Norris connector, that are still going through the certification process, because we want to make sure that, you know, everything it's outputting is safe and good to go. We also have a lot of weather connectors as well. We have a Spotify connector that I always like to talk about, because I use Spotify a lot to listen to music. So yeah, and there's just a lot more coming, and people are talking about updating their own. We have a Notion connector now, and I know Notion is pretty popular as a note-taking tool. And I spoke to Chandra today, that's right here. Chandra is saying that he's actively working on adding even more actions. And he's finding that it's going to be super valuable to students, right? So it's amazing to see the variety that we're getting and the different kinds of use cases, and also just the, you know, why people are building these connectors in the first place, right? Like for some, it's, you know, they've built a custom connector in the past and then they pushed it through the program, right? For some, they're you know, they're scratching their head thinking, I want to be part of this, but I don't know which one to build, right? So it's really interesting to see how people are coming up with these ideas, and you can get to learn a little bit more about what people care about too. I think that's the lovely part.
I wonder who's this Troy Taylor guy is, because I mean,
yeah,
a lot of time to build so many connectors. It's
yeah, and you know what's even more interesting? I think it was before this program. I don't think he's ever built a custom connector before. Like, and it's interesting. You should totally, if you don't follow him on LinkedIn or Twitter, especially on Twitter, it's like interesting, like to see his journey, like, and how quickly he can now build custom connectors, because he's so used to it, right? Like he's perfected it in his own way, right? He's found. He's just gotten into the rhythm and the pattern of things. So it's pretty awesome to see, like, you know, it's just like every week you kind of like, oh, try build another connector. This is awesome, right? But I'm glad that he's enjoying it and he's developing a really, really, really strong skill, right? Like the variety of API documentation that he has to read and you know, go through and open API files and I'm sure he also uses our new Postman v2 feature as a way to build the custom connector. So yeah, it's awesome to see that skill set grow.
I'll follow him. I mean, I would love to see this in other areas of the Power Platform for sure. I mean, this is beautiful. We do have initiatives like, you know, PCF Gallery and such, which is really cool. But I think the concept of open source components could grow. I think there is room to grow in for the other components, you know, Dataverse stuff, portals, even Canvas apps. I think it would be great if there was such a thing. The component I was talking about, the glucose monitor, the diabetes thing, it's number 11 from FlowJo.
Oh, that's a Dexcom one. I see. Oh, so it's already here. That's one that I haven't looked too hard into because I wasn't familiar with that. But now I really want to. That's
Right. Now,
especially when I do that demo recording with him. Very cool. I'm telling you, that's the first of its kind for sure.
Yeah.
And also, like if you see here, this one is really hard to pronounce, but it's the Norwegian registries, so the government registries. And then this one created by Mario Marco is Liberbor, which is, I believe, the Spanish registries. So it's also interesting how, like, you know, we're kind of getting Spain, Norway, and I think there's somebody else building registries to, I forget which country, but another one is coming. But and those are all public APIs, right? So I think that's really all you need to start with, right? A public API, whether it's something that you're using or something you know people need and something that you know will be helpful and valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So let's go through how to submit a custom connector to the program. So of course, these are high level. The documentation goes way deeper into, you know, what you need to do and the specifics, like adding the stack owner property and so many more. But basically, you know, if you have a product that you use often, if there's no connector to it, go check, make sure first, right? Because we don't want duplicates. And it has a public API, build it, right? Like, I think there's like, you know, there's Spotify, there's that we have already, but Pandora is one that we've heard people ask for. So that's one that's out there still. And, you know, like this is the place to go if you're stuck. This list isn't that long, but we always monitor our discussions in our GitHub repository and then add to this list as people ask, or we check in the forums as well, right? This is a good place to kind of start if you're stuck. And you know, when you start, you can build, there's different ways that you can build the custom connector in the UI. And I mentioned that the learning module is super helpful. So that's on the bottom right. I was looking into that learning module a lot today and kind of because it requires that you download an open API file. So it makes it really, really easy to build a custom connector. But I was kind of going in there and thinking about how can we publish a version where we're not using an open API file. So it's a little bit harder. So it really teaches you how to go back and forth between the API documentation. So hopefully I'll be able to like publish that soon privately, just so that we have both options, just to see if somebody wants to take it to the next level and try something a little bit more advanced. And Postman v2, this support is something that people were asking for years. And we pushed it out, I believe, in September of this year. So super fresh feature in the past 2 months. Postman v1 was deprecated for a while, and so people weren't able to really use this feature, but now we have this, so that also helps. Step 2, prepare artifacts. So your Swagger file, right, the API properties file, which refers to, if you're looking at the custom connector UI, it refers to step 2, security, so basically how you're authenticating. And then a README MD file for documentation. We have like a standard template, but we also see some people deviate from it and provide even more information about how to get started, especially if the API or the connector itself is a little bit more complicated. And make sure that you follow the documentation in general. That's super important, right? It's super detailed and super step-by-step. As long as you do everything in there, you should be okay. And if there's something that's missing, documentation are living and breathing. We always appreciate feedback, and the second we hear something's missing, we try to add it in as soon as possible. So you can always feel free to reach out and let me know. And the other part that I mentioned it before, but in order to get it into GitHub, well, to get it out of the custom connector UI in the product and to put it into GitHub, you do need to use the PACon CLI tool to download the artifacts, and then you can use your own editor to add certain metadata and then add more descriptions, like Tomasz was saying before, just so that it's super, super usable and any customer could come and pick it up. Submit to GitHub. So this is where all the magic happens. After you name your pull request, you paste in screenshots to show that it works. We do this just to make sure that we can trust that you've tested it and that it works, right? So that to reduce a lot of the back and forth later on, and to make sure that things are going to go a lot more smoother. And as I mentioned before, all independent publisher connectors have the same icon, because we have there's legal risks if we did try to bring in the other icons. So there's that. And after that, it's time to go through with comments during certification. So we have some automations that run in GitHub. We have a Swagger validator that, if it does catch something, it'll tell you immediately. But we also have somebody named Srikanth, who's our great certification engineer, and he goes in and he provides feedback on, what you need to improve, how you can make your connector better, and he also does all the testing, right? So people always ask, how can I trust this from a security standpoint, right? Of course, we're always verifying the endpoint to make sure that Spotify connector is actually connecting to Spotify and not something else that we should be afraid of. But we also, in addition to the automated, we have somebody who looks at the entire file, right? So there aren't any surprises or any middle spaces. And the other thing that's super important to understand is that connectors don't store anything, right? They're just a proxy or wrapper around the API to get into our Power Platform products. So those two combined, right, and the fact that we rigorously check everything, just like any other connector in our platform, can hopefully bring that confidence for people to use these, right? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who builds it, right? If it's a great connector, it should deserve all the eyes and all the respect and all the praise. Great, and then you can always submit an update to the connector anytime after it's deployed. We've seen a couple of our connectors be updated for various reasons, if people want to expand functionality or fix an issue. And you show off your connector. So you have an opportunity to demo your connector with me at the biweekly PNP Microsoft Dev call. So Tomasz was with me last time. The next time we're going to be talking is in 2 weeks on the Notion connector. So I'll be bringing over a couple of people to provide that. So it's a great way for you to show off what you've done and tell the community how they can use it and what use case scenario you can have. You can also be featured in the bi-monthly new independent publisher connector blog that's released by us. And yeah, you can share your connector. And I think the best part is that when I see, customers on LinkedIn or Twitter saying, yes, or just people in the community, yes, finally we have that connector. Thank you so much for building it, right? Because it really does make a difference in making people's lives easier, whether they're building apps or workflows, because now, instead of 10 different people independently building a custom connector, right? Why not have one person build it and then a bunch of other people kind of contribute to it and have it just available in the product, right? It just makes sense that way. It's so much easier for everyone at the end of the day. So yeah, that's all I had for today. I also have a bunch of useful links that I'll just copy and paste into the chat for people to have. And if we want to share that with the community, that's fine as well. Yeah, so that's all. Any questions or comments? So I see, do we have any connector related to part of speech tagging? So I think this is related to the lobe connector that you were mentioning before in figurative language.
That's relation to. I can hear my own voice. Sorry. It's in relation to creative writing or understanding language. So, for example, illustrations, onomatopoeia, and nouns, adjective, adverbs. Because the idea that we had was to have sort of text recognition where it can recognize this thing, or you can set yourself a challenge, write a sentence with 2 adjectives, 3 nouns, with 1 onomatopoeia and 1 metaphor, things like these. And you can, the text could be scanned and it will understand. So based on the connector, we could have, or we could train the AI builder to identify and then score the writing accordingly.
Yeah, we don't have a connector to that. And I wonder what API we can use to get there, because that's very interesting.
Yeah, there is paid API, which I could find, which has this part of speech tagging. But figurative language, I don't think there is any for now.
There's an excellent opportunity.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, you can.
Okay. And as you said, there's no connector for that. So if we don't have a connector, let's build it.
Yeah, there you go. That's exactly the enthusiasm and the attitude we need. I love it. Why not, right? If there's an opportunity, you just got to do it.
Yeah, I got a question. I know that these connectors are using the Open API for whatever, product or vendor makes available. How do you deal with changes to the API? I know most of the responsible devs, they will create different versions so your connector wouldn't break, but there's always that case where your version is no longer supported. Is there anything that Microsoft does to validate the connectors over time, or is it the job of the author?
So that's a really good question. So it's the job of the author, and I think it helps having the name on it, because then it's like, oh, it's like, that person didn't take very good care of their connector. But no one's pointing fingers or anything like that, right? Like our community, if a customer notices, right? If we find out through ICMs, or if a customer just tells us, or if somebody puts it in GitHub, right? The moment we find out that it's not working, we turn it off, right? We deprecate it. We give it a chance to, we give people a chance to kind of update it, right? Update the endpoints and everything if necessary, right? So that's kind of how we do it. But also we do see that sometimes, people update a connector and it might cause a breaking change, right? Whether the API changed or whatever they're doing to their connector is going to break something. We do have a breaking change validator that catches that immediately when people put their update into GitHub, right? So that's kind of like, that kind of helps prevent something like that. But even internally in Microsoft, right, with like the SharePoint connectors, Teams connectors, Salesforce connector, which we've built, we can't predict if the API is going to change. So it's, once we find out from customers, it's a reactive model.
I don't think anybody's able to predict anything about Salesforce, but that's enough. Anyhow, well, this is very good. I mean, I hope it has helped everyone as it has helped me. I'm gonna save some time maybe during the Christmas break to build one connector, maybe a funny connector that generates those hero images. We would do something like that and then spits out base64 strings. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but yeah. Let me look at the chat and see if anybody else has asked anything. Tomasz, based on your experience as a builder, what can you give us? Any pointers, concerns? What share from your long journey? What do you think is the best?
Right. I mean, the journey wasn't that long, but that's something I as well written and recorded. So just try to really write all the descriptions and titles for the fields and for the actions so that they're really well described. And remove everything that is empty from the final JSONs, like once you download the connector to your machine. So to add those additional or final touches, then just be sure there are no like empty actions, no empty triggers, no empty responses, no empty parameters, and so on. And as Natalie said, remember to add the README. It is as well really well described, and it contains all the information that might be useful for the users. Plus that you're using the proper icon color and that you add all this required metadata that is as well described in the documentation. I mean, in the end, the documentation is really well. So if you just follow the steps, then you're just good to go.
Awesome. Awesome. That's good. I see on the chat window, Natalie, that you have placed lots of good resource here. I'll try to replicate that and put it on the post when this video goes to YouTube. We'll make it happen. We'll edit there as well. Yes, folks, I think that's it. If no one else has comments, questions, concerns, we can call it good, I think. Anybody else? Natalie, any last words you want to say?
No, I'm just I'm looking forward to seeing some of you build some connectors and letting us know, what we can do to make your lives easier in the whole process.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks again for your time. Enjoy the rest of your time there in Portugal. I hope you pick up some Portuguese. One that's very used is obrigado. So thank you. Yeah, and I hope we can connect again soon. Thanks, Tomasz. Pranav, my friend, and Dad, thank you. I hope you enjoy the weekend. I'll be live tomorrow. I'm doing a session on database design in Dataverse. So we're gonna talk about database design first, the theory and all that, and then we'll see how the theory is applicable to Dataverse. As if you worked on Dataverse, you probably seen that not all the relationship types that we see in regular databases are available there, let alone other objects like triggers and things like that. So I'll be presenting on it tomorrow at it's gonna be 1 p.m. my time, 3 p.m. Eastern. I would love to see your faces there if you'd like to learn a little bit about database design. Of course, if you already know, no point in joining unless you want to cheer me on. So it'll be good. And then I'll be in Dallas on December the 3rd. I'm doing a deep dive on Power Apps portals in Dallas at 9 a.m. Friday, December the 3rd. So it's an in-person event, and I would love to connect with you there. And the last part of the announcements is our next session on Zero to Hero. We're doing a full-blown mentorship session on Dataverse. So 3 months on free training from again, database design, form design, views, and we're going to be looking at JavaScript development for Dataverse, plugin development, PCF development, ALM, including DevOps, and all that. And this time we're going to be doing that in different regions. So I'll run myself, Cheryl, and Raz. We're going to do English Global, but then we have friends doing Latin Americans in Spanish, Brazil, Portugal, Portuguese, India, Singapore, Dubai, Quebec, and France, and Israel as well. So across the globe, free mentorship. If you would like to participate, you can sign it. And I think that's it. I was sharing the wrong screen the whole time. So yeah. So if you want to join me, again, I'll present tomorrow, then December the 3rd in Dallas in person, and in January, we're going to be doing the Dataverse Quest Zero to Hero. All right, so thanks everybody. Thanks Natalie, and Pranav, and Tomas, and everybody else who is in this call. Love you much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Natalie. Bye, Pranav. Bye, Goshen. Bye, others. Bye, Victor. Bye-bye.